Hello. So I'm in the middle of doing my hair and I just wanted to share this because it's fresh on my mind. And this is kind of in response to my Instagram stories today. And I had somebody replied and had said, uh, you know, this is an allusion to the people of Palestine and all of this. And, what initially frustrated me was that the person hadn't watched my video where I elucidate far more about my perspective and my points around what's going on that main stage, what's going on in the realm of political theatre. And this person obviously seems to really care about Greta Thunberg. That's, where we differ, because the moment I saw her come out, I can't remember when she started getting big, or I say getting big, when she started getting put forward in the main stage. I can't remember when this was, but a good few years ago now, right? I instantly knew. I was like, she is a plant, what we would call in the conspiracy circles a plant, a shill, somebody who is there to anchor and forge space for certain types of movements. And if you look back throughout, even, very recent human history, often the people who head movements are planted there by the CIA, by MI5, and the CIA and MI5 will come out and admit it later on. Just look at the hippie movement in the 60s. Perfect example of that, where the CIA has come out and said, yeah, we had people planted in there. And it was all to do with the Vietnam War and them not wanting mainstream people to get behind the Vietnam War, not wanting your average white collar person to get behind the Vietnam War. So they there's a word I keep trying to say and it keeps coming out as anchored, engineered it into it being, against the Vietnam War was connected with being a hippie and being a drug taker and being somebody who takes psychedelics. So this has happened time and time again, and it's not new. And the issue is that we are so disconnected from history. We are so disconnected from the occult. That is the issue here. And this is what I'm really seeing playing out, in so many people, is that we are not esoterically literate. We have not been taught to view what is hidden. We are taught to only see what is loud and what is right in front of us, rather than to go, wait a minute, there's depth here. There's something else that's going on behind the screens, behind the mask, behind the masquerades. And I had a really beautiful question from someone as well, which was, how can we make sure we're not getting caught up in these things? And I think something that's really key with this is, as within, so without. If you are caught up in your own illusions, if you are wearing masks in your own reality, if you are still pretending that you're somebody that you're not, if you are still different people around different people, right? And obviously, there's certain contexts where we manage our behavior. We're not going to say certain things in front of certain people, sure, right? And there's things you wouldn't say in front of a 5-year-old that you might say in front of your best friend. That's called tact. However, there's also when we are performative and we don't feel safe to express who we are. All of these kinds of things, if you have that within you and you choose to continue playing out those same roles that you were handed, or that are ancestral, or that are past life and are running as loops in your Akashic, if you're still choosing that as your reality, you're going to be so much more susceptible to not being able to discern the truth, and so much more susceptible to getting caught up in groupthink and that sort of collective stream. And so we really want to be looking at where we're happy to go along with the crowd, or where we just agree with something because somebody else is doing it or somebody else is saying it, and look at more of the ways in which actually we're okay with being different, and we're okay with standing out, and we're okay with not being seen as the norm, because that is how you start to see through the facades that are placed in society. And for me personally, a huge factor for me was growing up mixed race in Scotland. I was always seen as different. I was never going to fit in. People it automatically didn't like me and didn't want to be around me because of the way that I looked. So there was so many different things that happened in my childhood as well that made me go, okay, what I'm seeing in front of me is fucking bullshit, and I'm not going to subscribe to it. So I have a million stories of ways that I was like, Mum, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to school assembly because I don't believe in God. I don't believe in, whatever it was. I made it really clear that I wasn't gonna align myself with that group think. And so looking at the ways in which that might occur naturally for you, and looking at the ways in which your discernment works for you if you're around certain people, or you're picking up on certain things, whether it's you walk into a room and you're like, oh, I think somebody recently had an argument here. All of those little things are discernment. All of those things are subtle energies. And one of the major issues in our current society is everything is so loud. Everything. So if you're somebody that reads the news every day, that just embeds themselves in social media constantly checks their phone, always has their notifications on loud, things like that, it's like you're attuning yourself to noise rather than the subtle vibrations and currents and frequencies that exist within you. There are subtleties that only once we decide that we're no longer picking up on the things that are really loud, that we start to be able to hear, the whispers and the things which, once you're attuned to them, also become loud within you, right? But that are not, presented that way within us until we choose that avenue or that path. When we choose, actually, I'm going to go with what I think. I'm going to sit and contemplate. I'm going to work out what I really feel about this situation, rather than look to other people to tell us how to think. And something else I think that is really key, and where you can start actually looking at this within yourself, is, whatever it is with, Greta Thunberg or Elon Musk, whoever it is, what is your resonance? What is the frequency that you're holding in regard to them? What is it that you feel towards them? Because that shows you what resonance you're sitting at. If you're somebody that's like, I love Greta Thunberg and I think she's amazing and I think she's all of these things, right? Why is it that you think that? Why is it that you're buying into an idea or a character and creating a parasocial relationship with somebody that you do not know and you have never met? It's asking questions like that. It's like, why do you, whether it's, Donald Trump or whatever, why do you hate him? I'm not a Trump supporter. Of course not. I think he's an occult. I think he's part of the Masonic brotherhoods. I think he's, whatever it is, but I don't hate him. I don't have emotions towards him, because, and this is another factor in this as well, is our emotions are useful for knowing the ways that we are feeling, right? We have to be emotionally literate. We have to be emotionally intelligent and tune into those, but we don't want to lead with them, because that's not taking into account the other layers and levels of ourselves, with the subtleties of how we think, how we experience the world. We have different layers. And if we're only going in with our emotions, we're overriding all of our other capacities and senses and subtleties of how we interact with the world. So it's really important that if you notice that you are feeling a really strong emotion towards something, that you sit with that. You first of all ask if it's even yours, because most people are not even feeling their own emotions when it comes to this stuff. They're reading headlines, they're plugging into collective frequencies, and they're literally just downloading what other people feel and think, rather than tuning in to what their own compass and what their own discerning radar is trying to tell them. So asking, okay, is this emotion even mine? It would be a really good question to start with, and being able to sit with that emotion, let it burn within you, let it move through you, and then starting to contemplate deeper on how you actually feel. Another piece around this is just actual research. And I know that it's a lot harder. When I was first looking into this kind of stuff, it was like 2011, 2012. There was not as much censorship on the internet. So there was so many people that were doing really amazing research that now it will be buried. You probably could never find it on Google, right? But it's just starting to be discerning. Okay, so this person's getting a lot of media attention. Why are they getting a lot of media attention? What are their family connections? Are they part of an elite family? Are they part of a very wealthy family? Often that can be indicative of somebody who is controlled. Not always, absolutely not always. But it's just starting to think in terms of, if you were somebody who was trying to get control over people, what would you do? And I think it's really hard for people who haven't met their own darkness and their own shadow to be able to think in terms of how deep this goes. They're like, oh no, but surely this whole thing can't be orchestrated. But once you start to, one, look at your own shadow, two, look at your own darkness and what you could be capable of given the right circumstances, and start to understand numerology, astrology, all of these threads, then it's really easy to start to be able to analyze and see what other people might be using, what other people might be doing in order to create control, and in order to have that source of energy and attention from the masses. We have to think about it. If we're a world of, whatever it is, they say 8 billion people, we have to be controlled. There's a very small amount of people who have a vast amount of control over the larger amounts, right? The masses. And so they are trying to not only maintain that control, but they're trying to establish an agenda. So when you start to think about it in terms of that lensing, that this is a plan, that there is something bigger, that there's a blueprint behind this, then it starts to become a lot simpler to understand that what we're seeing as and perceiving as singular events are part of a tapestry, are part of a much larger picture for plans to be rolled out in future. Now, you only have to take a look at different councils' plans for 2050. You only have to take a look at even the 2030 agendas, WEF, all of these big organizations, a lot of them fueled by climate change. This is why Greta Thunberg, come on, look at the agendas that she is promoting. I'm not saying that the climate isn't changing, but what I'm saying is that the ways in which these certain mechanisms of control can be rolled out because of climate change is part of a much larger plan. So often what happens is they create a problem, everybody reacts, and then everybody asks for a solution. So that's something you can research: problem, reaction, solution. When you start to understand that this is how events on the main stage start to this is how events on the main stage unfold, then it becomes a lot clearer. it becomes a lot clearer that these things are orchestrated, that they are controlled, and that they are engineered. They are not, for the most part, organic events. When you see these huge things that capture so much public attention, I'm not saying every single one of them is a complete and utter orchestration, but the vast majority of them are. And if you look at these key events and then look at the way that people react, and then look at the way that the governments then respond by implementing new laws, 9/11 is a perfect example of that. All of the privacy laws that they were able to revoke and then implement the Patriot Act, implement all of these different acts in order to be able to legally tap people's phones. You know, there's a blueprint, there's a method, and it happens over and over again. And so that's why I'm saying, watch your reactions, watch how you invest your energy, because when you are in a state of deep emotions, your brain is not working effectively. You are not cognizant, you are not clear-minded. That's why we always say, don't act on anger, don't act on deep sadness, because those emotions they're moving through you, they're transient, they will pass, and from that you will gain greater clarity. So I hope that makes sense. Thanks for listening, and thank you to the people as well who said that they really appreciated my last video as well. So thank you, and do let me know your feedback on this one.